So that's a question, film. Interestingly, I was trying to go kind of beyond and go beyond class. I would say these girls, the like some of them it's interesting. Class in India is also so fluid as such, right? So Mallika is actually fairly middle class, actually. I mean, she comes from a small village, but they're pretty decently off. So, but when I was doing the research, these are the 3 stories I found that moved me, and they were 3 stories. One can sort of subdivide it and say, I want one from each class, and I want one from each profession, and I want one that represents da da da. But eventually, what I found is when I met them, I was just charmed by them, and I felt that they were really powerful, and so I went with them. But I do think it is a critical question, and I do feel it's a shortcoming in that it shouldn't ever be thought that this is an issue that only affects women of a certain class. It is very much cutting across all tiers of society, and it is. I wish I could have found a character that could have showed that as well. So thanks for pointing that out. When we looked at the editing, we looked at it in a slightly thematic way. So I mean, if you see, it's also your classic 3-act structure, right? Like it's the sadness of their life, then they're sort of breaking out, and finally their levels of achievement. But within the characters, we were trying to paint, if one character is saying X, that applies in a way to all of them, so we were trying to weave it in that way, and that did take a certain amount of time because we had to look at it fairly thematically. What's really interesting is this film, I've been showing it around in colleges. I showed it at SNDT and St. Xavier's, and even when we showed it in Kerala, there was a lot of young people. In Delhi, there was a lot of young people. Young people really connect because I think they're in that space. They're really there. And what's interesting is a lot of young men come up to me afterwards, and they're like, we appreciate this because it's not just an issue that affects the women. I think it affects the entire society, and they see this kind of divisions happening. So if there are, by the way, any colleges or anything that people recommend, I find that this film is, it holds a lot of ground with young people. The film also played on Doordarshan, so hopefully we'll play again, and it's been going around to festivals and things. But yeah, the editing was interesting. But their stories are fairly straightforward also. So getting the voices from the field, from the community was, and then weaving those in was also somewhat of a little bit of a challenge because we wanted to match it because not all of them knew those particular characters, but we were careful to get the voices from the actual neighborhoods they inhabit. We really wanted that. And like I said, I was quite disappointed in the attitudes of people. I really was.
The 26 minutes, the kind of subtext that you weaved in, which kept coming back in different contexts, it takes in quite a skill. And I'm greedy today. I'm sorry, I'm meeting her after after 14 years. So if one were to ask you from your film My Kashmir to Red Roses to this film, what has been your realization as a filmmaker when it comes to the craft or emotion? Because you are a woman filmmaker. Yeah.
I mean, it's a great question, and I think each film teaches you so much. I mean, that's the beauty of making a film. It's really just a learning process for yourself. I mean, I consider it a very selfish act in a way. You always think you're giving a voice to others, but it's really all about your own learning. Red Roses, my first film, actually, I was in the US, I was in New York, and I was very curious about the voices of South Asian women. And we ended up shooting in a beauty parlor in Queens. And it was an amazing space because actually what happens in New York is the whole division between the different countries breaks down. It's just South Asia. And so we interviewed, we basically just hung out in this beauty parlor, and the women kept coming in, and we kept engaging with them. And our central character was one of the hairdressers, who was a young Bangladeshi woman who was about to get married. And what we found is that most women who are coming there because of their family obligations, or they're coming there not out of any purpose of themselves. But they develop a very interesting relationship, because on the one hand, they're almost uprooted from their traditions, but once they are uprooted, they actually end up finding a considerable amount of freedom. So it was a really interesting, a very gray area in a way. There was no way to really classify the experiences of the women there, you know. The older women are much more nostalgic, but the younger ones find much more, a much more interesting space.